Hello, PennDOT Community Traffic Safety Partners. Thank you for joining us for another video which is being produced for you by the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia Center for Injury Research and Prevention. In this video, Chapter 8A, we'll talk about the fundamentals of program adaptation, why it's important and valuable to adapt evidence-based programs, and what are the core components for modifying or adapting a program. What can we change that would be considered acceptable? And what changes would be considered unacceptable or risky in program adaptation? Why should evidence-based programs be adapted? In our previous video, Chapter 7, we talked about evidence-based programs, what they are, and the value of evidence-based programs. But sometimes evidence-based programs need to be adapted because interventions are not always one size fits all. When the setting or the population that we're looking to serve is different than that of the original intervention, we may need to adapt the intervention to our needs. But there are certainly principles of adaptation and guidelines for making any adaptation successful. One of the most important things to remember about adapting any program is that what matters most is how well it fits for your circumstances. We really like this quote. There is nothing inherently superior about any intervention method or any method of social change. It always depends on the appropriate fit of the intervention with the person or population and their circumstances and the delivery setting. So we need to remember that no matter how great an evidence-based program is, unless it can meet the needs of our communities and our settings, it's not the best program for us. So adaptation helps us to make the changes we need so we can get the best of both worlds. What is adaptation? Adaptation is simply the process or state of changing to fit to new circumstances or conditions. It's the extent to which an innovation can be changed or modified in order to make it fit our needs. When it comes to adaptation of evidence-based programs, there are many key terms that get thrown around. Let's make sure you're clear about what all of these elements mean. The first is program adaptation. Program adaptation is simply the deliberate or the accidental modification of a program or elements of a program. The core components of the program are the elements of the approach or the program that fundamentally define its nature. These are what most likely account for the main effects that we've seen, which have made that program particularly successful, from its theoretical foundation to its logic models and its empirical evidence. Program fidelity is a term that refers to how well or how close we match the program that we implement to the original program. So it's the closeness between the developed and the defined components of the program and its actual implementation. Program fit is the degree to which a program has been adapted to incorporate to a new setting and audience characteristics in the planning process. So what are the core components of a program? In other words, what are those kind of meaty elements that determine a program's success and outcomes that we want to consider incorporating and which we might want to have some adaptation to in order to work for our situation? The first is the program structure and the audience, the basic design or the organization of the intervention. This might include things like the number of sessions of the program, the setting in which the program was offered, and key descriptors of the target population, like the age that the program was targeted to or the primary characteristics of the program's audience. The next core component of a program is, of course, its content. What type of information was delivered? What were the learner objectives? What skill-building activities were incorporated into the program? The delivery method. What method was used to transmit the program to the target audience? Was it online? Was it in person? Was it over the phone? When we want to define the extent of our adaptation of a program, we need to ask ourselves the right questions. What is going to need to be changed? Is it the delivery, the content, the audience? And as you deviate from the program, be careful of the assumptions that you might make about the outcomes, because the outcomes that you get when you adapt may be different than the outcomes of the original evidence-based program. So how far do you really want to stretch yourself from the original program? Far enough that it fits your audience's needs? Sure. But so far away that your program doesn't have any fidelity to the original? Probably not. So let's talk about what modifications you can make to an evidence-based program that are considered acceptable. The first of these is changing the language or replacing the cultural reference of the original program. So whether or not there needs to simply be a translation, perhaps of language, or maybe modifying vocabulary, or making something a lower literacy level, or adjusting some of the terms for the particular cultural groups that you're going to be working with. Another acceptable modification would be to modify some aspects of the activities, such as physical contact, and adding relevant, evidence-based content to the original program to make the program even more appealing to your own participants. But other modifications would be considered risky or unacceptable when adapting a program. These include lowering the level of participant engagement, reducing the number or length of sessions, or the key messages or the skills that they taught, or removing topics altogether, or using staff or volunteers who are not adequately trained or qualified, or fewer staff members than are recommended. Making these changes could really sacrifice our ability to be able to replicate the kinds of findings of the previous program. This program adaptation checklist can help you look at an original program and the program needs that you have for your own community and determine what changes you need to make. Start by looking at the objectives of the original program and how closely aligned they are with your own objectives. Then look at the approaches that were used by the original program. What kinds of concepts did they incorporate? What kind of theoretical basis did they have, if any? What was the content that they delivered? What educational level did they target? How deep was their coverage? What was the reading or literacy level of their materials? And how appropriate might this be for your particular audience? What was the level of understanding or acceptance of their program by their audience? And is that what you're looking for in your own? How well does the original program fit with your community resources? How similar are the channels of dissemination that were used for the original program to what you have available for your own use? What kind of terminology was used by the original program? Would that terminology fit your community, or would that terminology have to change? How well would the original program fit with your audience's culture? And lastly, how well did the original program fit with your intended actions and your intended outcomes for your program? This completes Chapter 8A, the fundamentals of program adaptation. In our next video, 8B, we'll talk about what program adaptation looks like in terms of the process so that you can start to proceed with your own program adaptation. Thank you for watching.